So next up, we have Peter Miscovich. Peter is an icon. I'm often daunted by his expertise in he's worked on both coasts. He has a great following. He's worked in several organizations that I know of, so I've followed him from place to place. And he's going to introduce a panel where they're going to talk about some of the metrics around different kinds of workplace. So, Peter Miscovich.
Yes. Can the panel come up, please? Mark, Ian, Martin. Either, anyway. Totally flexible.
Alphabetically. No.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. So, thank you for your kind introduction. I'm Peter Miscovich. I lead strategy and innovation at Jones Lang LaSalle. I focus on corporate strategy and workplace innovation for primarily Fortune 100 clients. And I've been very engaged and involved in the quantified workplace over the last several years. Conversations with Philip. It's sort of the next horizon in terms of measurement of workplace performance. And we've got a great panel today, and I'll give a little bit of context, then our panelists will introduce themselves and provide a little background on their business model. Mr. Housman from Evolv, MartinBrooker from Condeco, IanMorley from Serraview, and good friend and colleague MarkGilbreath from LiquidSpace. So to set up the conversation, and I'll give about 4 minutes of intro, we're going to do about 15 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I serve on the Accenture Technology Vision Board, and I'm one of 30 thought leaders with Accenture focused on next generation technology vision. And to Philip's earlier presentation, some of the presentations that were given here today, Accenture is very interested in combinatorial innovation. Combinatorial innovation is about convergence of multiple technologies to create entirely new business models. And none of us realized that we needed search until Google came along. I'll use an example for myself. About 7 years ago, I had a team of 10 to 12 in India doing research. And today, I have 3 knowledge robots, my knowledge bots, one of which can mine 600,000 websites in a day to extract knowledge for presentation content and for client work. I'm working with the CEO and a chief data science of a 70,000 person organization right now. They're using data analytics to entirely transform their business model and their talent model. These combinatorial advances are coming to the workplace. And in today's conversation, those of you who've been following the NSA issue, every keystroke, every website that you visit, every digital footprint, fingerprint activity you do can be mapped, it can be mined, it can be aggregated, and it can be quantified. And I tell people I haven't had an office in 10 years, to the earlier speaker. I work from 12 devices, I work from the cloud, and I work from the internet. And if you work from the internet, you basically are working in a quantified workplace modality. So we're in the age of paradox, we're in the age of complexity. None of the answers here presented this morning, not one of them in a single sense is the right answer. There's multiplicity of answers and multiple modalities of complexity occurring across every organization and across every workplace solution. So to begin, with that as context, we'll start with Mr. Housman of Evolv. If each of you could describe your business model and give a little example of, what's your value prop to the world?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Mike Housman. I'm trained as an economist. I have a PhD in econometrics. And Evolv essentially takes data that our clients are already generating on their workforce and helps them optimize human capital decisions throughout the employee life cycle. So examples of these decisions are, who do we hire and bring in? How do we train them? Who to supervise them? And then decisions around location. Where should we locate offices? Work at home versus on-site. Standing versus sitting. All of these things are data points that we're now capturing in our data warehouse. And we're able to use data to help our clients make decisions around these issues in a data-driven and evidence-based way. I'd prepared another example, but actually on the heels of Jacob's talk, I'd actually probably prefer to talk about work at home because actually we've done some work around that. We had a client that was specifically interested in understanding whether work at home employees stayed longer if they were more productive, because ultimately that's what we care about. We're trying to keep people longer, and we're trying to allow them to be more productive, allow them to perform better on the job. And so we've analyzed tens and hundreds of thousands of employees, and for this client in particular, we actually found that their employees that worked at home stayed 17% longer on the job, but their productivity matched those of on-site employees only for about 3 or 4 months, at which point their productivity actually dropped, and those of the on-site employees continued getting better at their job. So actually, I'll be the one case study, Jacob, that kind of
refutes Jacob a little bit, but that's okay. We like diversity.
And I'm happy to provide the citations and all that stuff and the methodology.
Thank you.
But the point is this: we're really excited because we've reached the point now where we don't need to make these decisions on the basis of gut instinct and intuition and have recruiters choose based on how they have for years and years. Now we can make these decisions based on the data and the criteria that truly matter because we can link it with workforce outcomes.
Excellent. Martin, Condeco's business proposal.
Good afternoon, everybody. MartinBrooker from Condeco. I think the interesting thing as we talk about the workplace of the future is that our value prop to organisations really is helping organisations schedule things, right? Schedule conference rooms, meeting rooms, and schedule booking a desk. In addition to that, we're helping organisations understand how the occupancy of their spaces through sensor technology. To your point, I was going to use one example. In fact, a couple of examples. Again, when we look at conference room space, when we look at our largest global customers, an oil and gas company, 4 million conference room bookings per annum. 4 million
per year,
right? Before they actually had a tool to effectively book that, 30% of those bookings were no-shows. So people actually scheduling to meet and then not showing up to meet because the calendar system couldn't cope or people didn't actually remember to cancel the booking. So by enforcing the discipline of checking in and checking out of a conference room, which is a very simple process, we reduced the no-shows by over 30%. So 30% of 4 million bookings is a significant number. As it relates to sensors, the thing that drove us into that space was really organisations were looking for us to give them advice as it related to hot desking or hotelling. Most organisations wanted to move to a more aggressive policy of providing bookable desks, but didn't know how to get there. So in most organisations, they would create a hotelling space or a general area where you would drop in and use on a first come, first served basis. But if 100 people turned up for those 25 desks on a Monday morning, or 5 people, no one would actually know. So just some examples there of what we do day to day.
Thank you. Ian, Serraview.
Thank you. Am I on the mic? Fantastic. So IanMorley from Serraview, we produce a really great workplace management system. So when we think about the quantified workplace, it's really about one where you all as real estate professionals can really simply, easily extract, unlock, and really drive the full value of your real estate investments that you've made. For us, when we look at driving real estate investments and getting the most out of them, it's a journey of continuous improvement. So it's 4 key things. First of all, measuring what you've currently got, understanding how it's being utilised, and really trying to find out more about your business requirements. Second step is then planning for how you can restack or reconfigure your space to best deliver to your business requirements and utilisation rates. The fourth one is having simple tools to enact that change, relocate people into that new space. And the fourth one, I think, is almost the most critical, which is always, always, always facilitating great, deep, rich conversations and communications with your business units. The more that you understand your business units and their requirements, the usage of space, the more that you're going to be able to produce and collaborate with them to get better solutions. If you can take that relationship that you've developed with them with some great data as well, you're going to make better, smarter, more collaborative decisions with your business units, getting up with some great results for your workplace. And as we've seen across the board, Just huge bottom line savings when it comes to the cost of your real estate. A great example that we've had is Suncorp Bank. Suncorp over the last 3 years have used our tools and processes to get a continuous snapshot of their portfolio, develop deep relationships with their business and also their executive, which has allowed them, as they say, to get a great seat at the strategic table of the business, really driving the corporate strategy from a real estate perspective, and also, as a consequence, save over $30 million per annum in real estate costs.
Great.
So the quantitative workplace has a great set of opportunities.
Optimization, strong ROI. MarkGilbreath, LiquidSpace.
I'm Mark. I'm the CEO and founder of LiquidSpace, and we're a marketplace company. We have now built what I think you could consider the world's largest campus. We're now the largest online marketplace for real estate, with thousands of locations and the ability for individuals or for companies to be able to search, find, and book workspace on demand when they need it, where they need it, whether it's by the hour, by the day, or very soon by the month. So as we talk about quantified workplace, the key word there I think is quantified, which is talking about data, right? So what data is available about workplace, how can it be collected, and who are the constituents that might care? Well, for us, our principal focus is a side of the workplace that oftentimes gets ignored. Much discussion today has been about the workplace that is built and prescribed to employees, but I think we also all know that more and more work is happening beyond that campus or beyond that dedicated office much of the time. So our definition of workplace is not just the company's location, but all of the places where employees work. And so we have a unique position and a unique ability to collect data on how and where employees are working on the go, because our marketplace is principally one that is tapped into for those temporal needs, that interview for an hour, that off-site strategy session for a week, that swing space or project team space for a month. So our two constituents, our customers, if you will, for the quantified workplace are both the users of the space, right? The individual, the team leader that wants to schedule that offsite, or the HR professional who's doing that interview, or the salesperson who's running a sales team meeting. Their interest in data is finding the great space for the task at hand, right? There's an abundance of space in the world from a real estate capacity standpoint, but great space is special, right? And the best space to be able to work productively is something that is based upon my work style, my needs, and the task. So one constituent is the user. The other constituent is the employer, or the individual, and many of you, whose interest is in creating workplace environments for your employees. And our opportunity for you, with that hat on, is to provide you access to data that will inform you on the choices that your employees are making about workplace, the preferences they have, the types of spaces, the configurations of environments, the technologies that are important when they're working on the go. Imagine if you could influence your own internal office design principles, your space programming, your technology choices. Imagine if you could have access to exactly how and where your employees were working on the go, the choices that they were making when they exercised choice. Yeah. So we provide companies the ability to take that data and have access to it in real time.
Great. Let's look at challenges. I'd like to highlight ethics. So, PeterMiscovich, 12 devices, 18-hour days. The NSA knows everything I'm doing every day on the internet because I'm totally traceable. My digital fingerprints are everywhere, totally known on my iPhone 6, on all my devices. Mr. Housman, your firm is involved in ethics. Can you highlight what are some of the barriers to the quantified workplace? And what is the danger zone here if we become so quantified and so transparent that all of our activities are known every day, everywhere?
Yeah, it's an exciting time that this data is now becoming available, but we're sensing there's somewhat of a big data backlash. So articles now are increasingly with titles like robot recruiters. These are things that we're seeing out in the marketplace. The White House just released a report that talked about the opportunities and the challenges of big data. And so we actually did some soul searching and took it upon ourselves to write a big data code of ethics. And it's not a legal document, but the idea is it outlined our viewpoint about what was on and off limits. And among the values that we really wanted to highlight were that we were only going to use data that had been collected legally and with the knowledge of job applicants and employees, that we were going to be very transparent. I think a lot of people are scared of shadow data capture. Yeah. So data is being captured, on devices you're not even aware of, and now increasing.
Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Facebook. And some companies
Sorry,
are starting
Facebook.
to use badges to collect data on where people walk, who they collaborate with, who they talk to, tonality, things like that. So again, I can't speak towards any of those things, but I do say that we're very transparent about what data we're collecting and using. And we have, in many cases, opted deliberately not to use data that was actually very predictive of performance on the job because we thought that there was a gray area that we've tried to stay away from very deliberately.
Excellent. Any other thoughts from the panel on ethics?
I think I was going to say that one of the things, that was one of our key challenges when we launched the occupancy sensor, the device that goes under the desk, was the first thing we actually went out to the German Workers' Council in Europe just to really embrace that collaboration. Were we doing anything that could be seen as unethical? I think the biggest challenge as well is that when we look at the Fitbit and all these devices now that we're connected with, is what happens to that data. I may be happy for me to compete with my Strava cycling against some other people in a community.
And do you know what your doctor to know every breakfast?
Exactly. I was going to
that
say,
you
I
have
don't
and
want
what
in
you're
my
not
insurance
eating or what
company
you
knowing
should be eating.
how fit I am, right?
Right.
or not, as the case may be. So
Hello, big brother.
that's the issue, right?
Yeah, Mark?
I think the other thing to consider is that if we're going to choose to collect data and use it as a tool, you need to be a responsible steward of that data. And there are now opportunities to become certified and audited around that. In 2 weeks, we'll be getting our ISO 27001 certification as an audit, which means that we put in place an information security management system and we put ourselves up for measurement and testing on that. But the principle of it is that data is powerful, but it's also private, and you have to have systems around the administration of that, and your clients and your partners will expect that you do.
Great. Ian?
Just quickly, one of the key things that we found when collecting data about people in the workplace is that they're a lot more comfortable about you collecting that data if you tell them why you're collecting that, and also provide some benefit back to the individuals from that data collection. So often, as the case in the workplace, provide wayfinding services to help colleagues find one another, especially in flexible working environments.
Great. Okay, now let's talk about supply and demand. And if we're living in the age of workplace paradox, workplace complexity, I mean, HBR, you need more private space. Companies, Reddit, everybody's got to work at the office. Mr. Morgan, everybody's going to be virtual. I mean, the landscape is fragmenting. The modalities are becoming more numerous. So from a quantification perspective, to measure demand versus supply, co-working, flexible working, the human cloud. I mean, Philip's great jelly bean dialogue. Mark Gilbreath, from a LiquidSpace perspective, what are your thoughts on supply and demand, and how do we manage, from a quantification perspective, demand against perhaps an increasing diversity of supply?
I think the first thing to call out is that the pressures on us as sort of traditional CRE environment providers have become unmanageable. You can't take the traditional model and address all of the pressures that you're being faced with now. The mandate to reduce cost, the mandate to increase resiliency, as Chris said earlier, the mandate to speed delivery time, the mandate to match all of the work styles and preferences of your employees in order to retain them and hire them. You just can't do it with a fulfillment model that's based upon capitalizing buildings, leasing them for 10 years, taking a year or longer to build them out and occupy them. It just won't fit.
Traditional portfolio.
You can't do it. So new modality is to recognize that workplace is now going to be a combination of spaces that you own and build out, but it's also going to be increasingly based upon spaces that your employees tap into when and where they need to. And the good news is that there's an amazing ecology of transactional spaces emerging, whether it's in hotel environments or office centers or co-working spaces or libraries or REITs that are moving to progressive models, or even companies that are sharing their excess. There is a rich ecology of extraordinary spaces that want to be shared. And so the quantification of this, or the management of that, actually shifts away from all of us, and individual employees become their own architect. They become their own space programmer. They become their own CRE person. They're actually acting as an employee of a company, but they're choosing what fits for them. So in many ways, we're fractionalizing much of the CRE role and putting it on the backs of loyal and trusted employees.
So be your own demand.
Be your own demand.
Any other comments on the panel? No? Okay, let's look at harmonization. We've got all this legacy stuff. We've got legacy corporate headquarters. We're seeing distributed headquarters as an example. how does a quantified workplace reconcile legacy, portfolio issues, and some of the new modalities that are emerging? Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, again, I'm the data guy, so using data to figure out, first off, location matters tremendously, I will say. We find 27% of the variation in how long someone stays is attributable solely to their office location, whether in their cubicle or an office, standing versus sitting, work at home versus on site. So again, it's a huge amount of the variation in performance and attrition is dependent on that alone. And when you're choosing an office location, there are personal preferences that come to play. But for example, we're able to use data to figure out what matters more, distance to work or walkability, whether there are amenities nearby. And so using that data, and by the way, the answer is actually walkability, that there are a grocery store and convenience store and dry cleaner nearby matters to people 3 times as much as whether it's a longer or shorter commute to work. So it's a somewhat indirect answer, but at the end of the day, it matters less to us whether it's a single big location or many small locations, as long as the data supports that, and we're able to use the data to make more informed decisions about how to locate your offices.
By company.
Yep.
Martin?
I'll give you maybe one example of some projects that we've done recently with some very large organisations of those organisations really looking to consolidate their property portfolio. So one of the biggest challenges of some of the largest conglomerates is they've grown by acquisition, and then suddenly they've got 18 buildings in Frankfurt all at 30% occupied, right? So one of the challenges there is how do I get the data to allow me to make those decisions? And obviously, as you say, looking at what the commitment is on the lease breaks and other things that are going to happen in the future.
Any other thoughts? Ready? Last question. If we look out 5 to 10 years, what is the future of the quantified workplace? And what are we going to foresee? And with Accenture, we've looked at the issue of the balkanization of the internet. We're seeing this in China right now, in Russia, in the Middle East, where the internet is being balkanized, and actually there are big barriers coming up around the internet that are going to affect global entities in a very significant manner. So if we go out 10 years, will the quantified workplace be the norm? Will the ethical issues be addressed? MarkGilbreath, we'll start with you.
Mark Andreessen is a local entrepreneur. He started Netscape. He's now with Andreessen Horowitz. He's a pretty smart guy. And he famously said, software is eating the world, or software will eat the world. I think there's a new chapter to that, and it's marketplaces are eating the world. Some of the most exciting companies that have erupted onto the scene in the last several years, companies like Airbnb that didn't exist 5 years ago and are now worth more than $10 billion. Uber, that didn't exist 5 years ago and is now worth over $18 billion. These companies are marketplaces at the core. They're like Amazon, they're like eBay. And what's fascinating about these organizations is how rapidly they grow when they take. And they're exploiting broken old models, and they're bringing new efficiency to assets, and they're bringing new delightful experiences to users. So, 5-year prediction, I think marketplaces are eating the world. I think every asset class that has any whiff of inefficiency to it is ripe for improvement, if not disruption. And I think that there's a lot of food on the table in terms of the office landscape. Yeah. And so I think you're going to see an explosion and the same type of hyperbolic growth in terms of transactional use of real estate, whether it's by the hour or by the day or by the month. But I think you're going to see a land rush away from companies making only long-term commitments to space. The office will prevail still, right, but it will be complemented by an exploding landscape of space delivered in a more flexible way and a more personal way.
Let's go, Michael.
Yeah, I'll pose a hypothetical, which is not necessarily where I think things are headed, but I could imagine a world in 5 years when, for example, if you applied for a job, you would go through a series of questions, or not even, and just say, I want to apply for this job, and it would immediately render a response. Sorry, you didn't get it.
They would know you already.
Yeah, it would know you already. We found, for example...
Very scary.
It's a little frightening. We know, your browser, and your browser is a strong predictor of how good an employee you are. Chrome and Firefox users stay longer and perform better. So this is, I'm not kidding, this is what the data says.
Knowledge worker profiling.
Exactly. So I say all of this as kind of a devil's advocate. I don't think we want it to go there. And I think we need to use data as a tool. And ultimately, it needs to be someone on the other end of that interview table who's making a decision based on information they have available, one of which is the data that we've gathered on you in this application process. So that's where we think it could head, and we very deliberately tried to get away from that.
Yeah. Martin?
I suppose predicting things of the future is always a difficult one. I suppose a wish that I would have, if I look at my 13-year-old daughter, is that she starts to engage with the rest of the world rather than communicate through a device, right? And one of the challenges of the millennial workforce, and I do disagree with that we're all going to go work from home. I've tried it, and it's enjoyable from time to time, but it's not the silver bullet. Is that we actually still need to meet face to face. We still need to collaborate as a team. Yes, there's individuals that can work around the world and be anywhere. That's absolutely a given. But you know what? I do hope in 5-10 years' time we still actually meet and talk to each other in a bar rather than talk through a device, right?
Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I concur. I don't see the office going away because it is such a great way to collaborate and bounce creative ideas off each other. I see that as we go forward, we're going to get better access to data to understand what types of workplaces people actually enjoy working in. And that data is going to allow us to optimize our space into those types of spaces that people want to work in. We'll have great analytics. We'll have great tools to help people move towards those spaces. And also we'll have a technology to enable better customer experiences for our workers as well, so that they can get the most out of their workplace, find each other and collaborate with each other on a much higher, richer level.
Great. Great forecast. We have 5 minutes for questions. Anybody with a question? We couldn't have answered all your questions. Yes, you, ma'am. Can we get her a mic? Thank you. State your name and your organization.
It's Jennifer again. I work as an independent project manager, namely with life science companies. So if you're going to make this fabulous gourmet dinner at home and you have people coming over, you're not going to go and book a temporary space someplace to do it. These companies have proprietary devices, technology, equipment, dedicated specialty rooms for R&D all the way to FDA compliant drug. We're not going to pick up these workers and have them go anywhere. They need to be in the lab, ideally 80% of the time. So I can see how I would extrapolate a lot of what we're talking about today to a flexible workspace for those that may not be directly in the lab. Can you gentlemen speak more to the people who are tied to manufacturing, production, life science, those types of workplaces and spaces where they are tethered based on the technology and the outputs they're expected to produce?
I would say that I think the thing I didn't cover as it relates to looking 5 years, 10 years in front, which we're seeing today, is the concept of a working day is completely gone, right? There is no concept of, I was looking at my employment contracts as I'm employing people, and it says you start 8:30 and go home at 5. And I was thinking that I can't think of any employee that works for me that actually does that.
What
right?
fantasy world is that?
Exactly. And to your point, as it relates to, so what I would say is, as it relates to my business, scheduling things and the concept of checking in and checking out, when it's convenient for me to do that. So laboratories are one part of the production line, right? So there's no reason why you could, you wouldn't have a situation where you would book the laboratory space for a period of time.
Yeah, the other influence there will be intelligent robots as collaborators. And intelligent robots in the workplace are coming, and we will be collaborating with machines, sometimes in the virtual sense, like my knowledge bots, or sometimes in the physical sense. I have 2 pharma clients right now that have robots that are doing bioinformatics and drug development with human beings only providing oversight. And Apple and IBM teaming up with Watson, Siri, and hardware. Be prepared, folks. The robots are coming, and they're also going to change how we work and how we interact. Okay, we've got Jan, please. Mark.
I was just going to say I certainly would agree with your hypothesis that Procter & Gamble is not going to go out to a transactional wet lab anytime soon. But I can tell you actually that one of the interesting little signals that's creeping into LiquidSpace lately, the last couple of quarters in fact, has been a number of maker spaces and design environments that are purely transactional. And so they're giving P&G wet lab-like opportunities to young bioengineers or young makers. And so I think you're going to see an explosion on that front as well. You're going to democratize access to specialized work environments. So big entities will always be able to afford their own, and yes, they'll probably stick with those.
It was really more of a comment. Have you read The Transparency Trap, that new article in HBR? One of the points it makes is that, you know, when we're kind of constantly scrutinized, it tends to inhibit things that we do. We tend not to be creative. We tend not to fix problems. And I was thinking about it in the conversation you were having about living your life, you know, where everybody can see everything, and that notion of sort of the big brother thing. So I thought I'd just throw that out there and ask you guys to comment on that.
Yeah, you know, it's tough to say whether people are changing their behavior in response to knowing that there are people watching, right, in the workplace or when they're applying on jobs. We haven't seen any big changes. This has been over the course of 5 to 7 years, this transformation in applications, and we haven't seen any sort of real changes in behavior in terms of how they apply or how they respond to these questions. We're able to monitor things like honesty and integrity, and we find that they're relatively constant. But I think it's a really good point in that certainly once you start mining all this other data like Facebook and Twitter and all that, it is probably likely that people will really be very cognizant of what they're doing and maybe show less creativity.
I mean,
it's really interesting.
The recent, breaches on Facebook and Google, Mark?
Jen, I think it's a really big deal, and I think that the whole open space plan movement or meme of the last 5 years has been a pendulum swing. I think it's just the latest prescriptive work style that companies have foisted upon the employees, and the danger is now being documented in things like the transparency effect. I think the key is to give choice to the employees. You may still want them to work on the campus, but give them a palette of environments like Primo talked about, and let them choose what matches their style, rather than say you have to work A or B.
Okay, I'd like everyone to give our panel a great hand. Thank you very much.
And let's also thank Peter for guiding us through that, navigating us through that conversation.